Hi, my name is Charles, and this is Great Britain Nostalgia. In the terraced houses and council flats of post-war Britain, poor families were running household systems so clever that modern life coaches would charge you £100 a weekend to teach them back to you. Number 9 on this list kept damp off bedroom walls for less than the price of a box of matches. Number 4 was used by miners' wives in Durham and Yorkshire for generations, and it works better than anything you will find on the cleaning aisle today. These 15 tricks sound like folklore. Every single one of them is real. Number 15. Newspaper in wet shoes. If you grew up around anyone who lived through the 40s or 50s, you already know this one. When shoes got soaked through. And in Britain, shoes got soaked through roughly every other Tuesday from September to April. You did not put them on the radiator. You crumpled newspaper and packed it tightly inside, heel to toe, and left them overnight. By morning, the shoes were dry, not damp. Dry. Newsprint is extraordinarily absorbent. It wicks moisture from the inside out, drying the shoe evenly. A radiator dries the surface while leaving the inner sole sodden. Newspaper dries the whole thing through. In 1955, a newspaper cost 2p and did its first job at the breakfast table before doing its second job in the hallway overnight. School shoes from Clark's cost 12 shillings in 1958. Nearly a full day's wages. Those shoes had to last a year. Drying them properly was not a habit, it was economics. Number 14. Salt on a grease fire. This one could have saved lives. In a great many cases it did. If a pan of fat caught fire on the stove, and in kitchens where chip pans were on the go every Friday evening, this happened more often than anyone liked to admit. The instinct was to reach for water, and that instinct was deadly. Throwing water onto a burning fat fire does not douse it. The water vaporizes instantly on contact with the burning oil, expands to roughly 1,700 times its liquid volume in a fraction of a second, and blasts a fireball of burning fat outward and upward in an explosion that could take your eyebrows off and set the kitchen curtains alight before you had taken a single step backward. Poor families in Britain knew this. They knew it not because they had been taught fire safety in a council workshop, but because the knowledge had been passed down from mother to daughter to granddaughter across generations of women cooking over open ranges and later on, gas rings. Chip pans were dangerous. Water made them catastrophic. Salt did not. A fistful of salt thrown directly onto a burning pan smothers the fire at the surface. Salt does not conduct heat the way metal does. It forms a crust over the burning oil, cutting off the oxygen supply and collapsing the fire without creating the explosive reaction that water triggers. It is not perfect. A very large fire needed a heavy pan lid and a turned-off gas ring as well. But for the sudden flare of a chip pan catching, salt was the first and fastest answer. A bag of table salt cost about 3p in 1955. It sat next to the stove in every kitchen in Britain because it was needed for cooking every single day. The same bag that seasoned the potatoes was the fire extinguisher. That is the kind of double-use thinking that defined the whole era. Number 13. Brown paper and vinegar for headaches. I will be honest. When I first came across this one, I was convinced it could not possibly be true. It sounded like something out of a fairy tale, a nursery rhyme remedy. Jack and Jill, and a vinegar compress. I had to go and verify it myself, and what I found surprised me. Soaking a strip of brown paper in white vinegar and pressing it against the forehead was a genuine, widely practiced treatment for headaches in working-class British homes from the Victorian era right through to the 1960s. It appeared in household remedy books. It was recommended by mothers to daughters. It was used in homes from Cornwall to Caithness. And here is the thing. It has a physiological basis. White vinegar applied to the skin produces a mild cooling effect as it evaporates. That cooling causes a slight constriction of the surface blood vessels in the forehead. In headaches caused by tension or by dilation of the blood vessels in the head, which accounts for the majority of common headaches. That gentle constriction provides measurable relief. The brown paper held the vinegar against the skin and slowed the evaporation, extending the effect. It was not paracetamol. Nobody is claiming it was. But in a household where a penny spent on aspirin was a penny not spent on bread, and where a visit to the doctor cost a fee that many families simply could not afford before the National Health Service arrived in 1948, brown paper and vinegar was not superstition. It was resourcefulness. A bottle of white vinegar cost about 4p and treated dozens of headaches. The brown paper came from the butcher's wrapping or the fishmonger's parcel and cost nothing at all. Number 12. Bread is a plaster. This is one of those tricks where modern people hear it and think, well, that is disgusting. And then you explain the logic and they go quiet. When a child came in from the back alley with a splinter buried in a finger or a palm. Or when someone had a shallow wound from a kitchen knife or a piece of rusted tin. The instinct in a poor household was not to reach for the first aid kit. There was no first aid kit. There was bread. A small piece of stale bread, dampened with warm water until it was soft and pliable, was pressed firmly onto the splinter or the wound and held there. The softened dough conformed to the contours of the skin, and as it dried slightly, it created gentle suction. A splinter close to the surface would often be drawn up through the skin and into the bread. A shallow wound would be kept clean and covered while the body sealed it. The bread itself, particularly slightly stale bread, is mildly acidic. That acidity had a weak antibacterial effect. It was not sterile, and nobody should be reaching for a bread plaster over a pharmacy today. But in 1952, in a terrace in Salford with no antiseptic cream and no money to buy any, it was a sensible and effective first response. District nurses working in working-class areas of northern England reported this practice commonly in their notes from the 40s and 50s. They did not discourage it from minor splinters. They understood exactly why families were doing it. Number 11. Chalk in the cutlery drawer. This one costs almost nothing and it still works today. I personally think this is the most underrated trick on this entire list, not because it is the most dramatic, but because it is so elegant, so simple, so completely invisible in terms of effort. Working-class families who owned a set of silver-plated cutlery, and many did, a wedding gift or an inheritance, the kind of thing kept for Sunday best and brought out when the vicar came to tea, had a problem. Silver tarnishes. The dark, dull oxidation that creeps across silverware when it is stored is caused by sulfur compounds in the air reacting with the metal. Proprietary silver polish cost money. Polishing took time and effort, and for cutlery kept in a drawer and used infrequently, felt like a constant and losing battle. The solution was a stick of classroom chalk. A piece of chalk placed in the cutlery drawer absorbs the moisture in the air inside that small enclosed space. Tarnish requires both sulfur compounds and moisture to form. Remove the moisture and you slow the process dramatically. The chalk acts as a desiccant, a moisture absorber, for free. A box of chalk cost about a penny in 1950. One stick in the drawer and the silver stayed cleaner between uses. The cutlery still needed polishing occasionally, but the intervals were longer and the tarnish was lighter. Nobody taught this in chemistry class. Nobody read it in a magazine. It passed from hand to hand at the back gate, over the garden wall, in the queue at the butcher's. That is how working class domestic knowledge moved. Not through books, through conversation. Number 10. The stale bread heel as a pot scrubber. Every loaf ended in the same way. The heel, that dense, slightly tough end piece that nobody particularly wanted to eat, sat at the bottom of the bread bin until it hardened. In a household where nothing was wasted, that heel had a second career waiting for it. A day-old bread heel, dried to the point where it had become genuinely hard, was used to scrub baked-on food from the bottom of pots and pans. The texture of dried bread crust is slightly abrasive. Not aggressively so, not enough to scratch, but enough to lift the carbonized residue from the bottom of a porridge pot or a saucepan without damaging the surface. On cast iron, which was what most working-class kitchens were using through the 40s and 50s, this worked particularly well. Metal scourers scratch cast iron and damage the seasoning that builds up over years of use. A bread heel cleaned without scratching, and because it was already slightly porous, it absorbed the loosened food rather than smearing it around. When the cleaning was done, the bread went into the bin or onto the compost. It had done its job as food, failed at the breakfast table for being too hard to enjoy, and done its second job at the kitchen sink. That was the standard expected of everything in a household, where the margin between enough and not enough was measured in pennies. Number 9. Newspaper and rags against the drafts. In the back-to-back terraces of Leeds, Bradford and Sheffield, in the 2-up-2 downs of Nottingham and the miners' rows of County Durham, there was a particular kind of cold that people who grew up in modern housing have simply never experienced. It came through the walls. It came under the doors. It came around the window frames in the night and settled in the corners of the room and stayed there until April. Damp and cold together are not merely uncomfortable. They are a health crisis, respiratory illness, rheumatism, and the particular misery of a house that never fully warms up, regardless of how much coal you burn, were the constant companions of families living in housing stock that was, in many cases, already 50 or 60 years old, and built to the minimum standard of its era. The response was newspaper and rags. Sheets of newspaper rolled loosely and pressed into gaps along the skirting boards, stuffed around the frames of ill-fitting windows, pushed under doors that did not quite meet the floor. Old rags, strips of worn-out curtain or the sleeves of a coat that had finally given up, were used in the same way, particularly in areas where moisture might make newspaper disintegrate. It was not beautiful, it was not permanent, but the difference it made to the temperature of a room was measurable and immediate. A gap of 1/4 of an inch along the bottom of a door or around a window frame loses more heat than most people would believe. Seal those gaps with what you have, and the room holds its warmth. Modern draft excluders cost between £10 and £30. A copy of the Daily Mirror cost 2p. The physics is identical. Number 8. Chimney soot on the vegetable garden. Every chimney sweep in Britain left behind something beyond a cleaner flue. He left behind a bucket of soot, and the families he worked for knew exactly what to do with it. Chimney soot from coal fires is rich in nitrogen. Nitrogen is one of the 3 primary nutrients that plants need to grow. Modern nitrogen fertilizer, the kind sold in plastic bags at the garden centre, costs upward of £4 a kilogram. In the 1940s and 50s, nitrogen fertilizer was largely unavailable to ordinary families, even if they could have afforded it. But the allotment holders and back garden growers of post-war Britain were getting nitrogen for nothing every time the sweep came. A bucket full of soot dug into the soil around brassicas, leeks or runner beans in late autumn gave the ground a nutritional boost that carried through to the following spring. Soot also has a mild pesticidal effect. Scattered around the base of plants, it deters slugs and certain soil insects. The dark colour absorbs heat, warming the soil slightly around seedlings in early spring. The Royal Horticultural Society now sells advice on using wood ash as a garden amendment. The principle is identical, and the families of 1948 were ahead of that curve by several decades. They did not call it soil amendment. They called it not letting good soot go to waste. Number 7. Vinegar and salt as the household disinfectant. This is the miner's wives' trick, and I want to give it the proper respect it deserves. In the colliery villages of Durham, Northumberland and South Yorkshire, where men came home black with coal dust and the water supply was not always reliable, cleanliness was not a luxury. It was defense against infection in communities where a contaminated kitchen could put a whole household in bed. Before Dettol became a kitchen staple, Before Flash and Fairy and the entire post-war arsenal of branded cleaning products arrived, working-class women were cleaning with white vinegar and coarse salt. The method was simple. Mix white vinegar with coarse salt until the salt partially dissolved. Apply to kitchen surfaces, draining boards, toilet seats, and door handles with a cloth or a brush. Leave briefly, then wipe down. White vinegar is acetic acid. At the concentrations in household vinegar, typically 5%, it is genuinely effective against a wide range of common bacteria. Coarse salt adds mild abrasive action to lift grease and debris from surfaces. The combination cleaned and sanitized in a single step. A reference in the British Medical Journal from 1948 noted that acetic acid solutions showed measurable antimicrobial activity against common household pathogens, including E. coli and Staphylococcus. The cleaning product industry would prefer you thought this was folklore. It is chemistry. A 2-litre bottle of white vinegar costs about 60 pence. The branded antibacterial spray next to it on the shelf costs £2.50 and contains active ingredients that are substantially less studied. Your Nan was not being primitive. She was being precise. Number 6. A raw potato half on cast iron. This trick was passed through generations of scullery maids and factory wives, and it solves a problem that still plagues home cooks today. Cast iron pans rust. Leave one damp for 24 hours, and orange rust blooms across the surface. Neglect one for a week in a damp scullery and the rust goes deep. In modern households, people buy rust remover sprays or simply throw the pan away. In 1950, neither was an option. The pan cost money. The rust needed to come off. Cut a raw potato in half and rub the cut face across the rusted surface of the pan. Add coarse salt to the face of the potato as you go. The potato does two things simultaneously. Well, first, the cut surface releases oxalic acid, a naturally occurring compound that reacts directly with iron oxide, which is what rust is, and breaks it down. Second, the coarse salt acts as an abrasive, physically lifting the loosened rust from the surface as you scrub. Together, they clean cast iron rust without damaging the metal beneath, without chemicals, and without cost beyond a potato that had probably been sitting in the vegetable rack for a fortnight anyway. After the rust was gone, the pan was dried thoroughly and wiped with a thin layer of lard or dripping to re-season the surface. Back in service, not a penny spent. Not a oxalic acid rust removal products exist in hardware shops. They cost several pounds a bottle. A potato costs 20 pence. The chemistry has not changed since the potato was first pressed onto a rusty pan in a back kitchen in Bolton in probably 1880 something. Number 5. Raw onion on a sting. In summers that involved children, gardens, hedgerows, and the inevitable bad-tempered wasp defending its territory near the jam jars, this trick got used constantly. A bee or wasp sting produces localized inflammation. The venom introduces compounds that cause the surrounding tissue to swell, redden, and throb. The treatment that families reached for before antihistamine creams existed was sitting in the vegetable rack. Cut a raw onion in half. Press the cut face directly onto the sting site. Hold it there for several minutes. Raw onion contains quercetin, a flavonoid compound with documented anti-inflammatory properties, and organosulfur compounds that have a mild analgesic effect when they contact skin tissue. The onion does not neutralize the venom, but it meaningfully reduces the inflammatory response and the associated pain. The coolness of the fresh cut onion surface also provides immediate comfort in the same way a cold compress does. This was known from the Highlands to Cornwall, from agricultural communities where working outside meant regular encounters with stinging insects, to back gardens in industrial towns. An onion cost a penny or two. It sat in the kitchen for cooking. When a child came howling in from the garden, clutching a stung hand, the onion was already there. Antihistamine cream now costs £3 to £4 from the pharmacy. The onion costs 15 pence and works on the same principle. Your Nan was not reaching for folklore. She was reaching for the nearest quercetin source she had, which happened to be sitting in a bowl on the kitchen windowsill. Number 4. The wool stocking and goose fat. For Chest district nurses in the mining communities of Durham and Nottinghamshire were recommending this into the 1960s. When I first read that in an oral history archive, I had to read it twice. When a child developed a bad chest cold, working class families did this. Rub goose fat or beef dripping thickly across the throat and upper chest. Wrap it in an old wool stocking. Pin it loosely and leave it overnight. The wool retained heat against the skin. The fat held that heat in. Together they loosened tight airways and soothed inflamed tissue through the worst hours of the night. The district nurses knew this was not superstition. It genuinely improved local circulation. It did not cure bronchitis. It made a sick person comfortable using nothing but what was already in the house. Before 1948, a doctor cost money. Goose fat and an old stocking cost nothing. That was the whole calculation. Number 3. Candle wax on the stiff drawer. The simplest trick on this list. You can try it tonight if you have a stiff drawer and the stub of an old candle. Run the candle along the wooden runners the drawer slides on. Top edge, bottom edge, anywhere wood meets wood. Open and close it a few times to work the wax in. That is it. The drawer moves smoothly. Wax fills the microscopic imperfections where friction catches. It does not go rancid. It does not gum up. It simply sits in the grain and lets the surfaces slide. In 1953, candle stubs were never thrown away. When a candle burned too short for the holder, it went into a tin on the mantelpiece and waited. Stiff drawer, sticking door, swollen sash window. One stub did half a dozen jobs. Hardware shops sell silicone spray for £4. A candle costs £1 and heats the room while you use it. Pattern break 3. I actually called my mum after researching this section because I knew she had grown up in exactly this kind of household. Her family was from West Yorkshire. Her mother kept a candle tin, a vinegar bottle under the sink, and a jar of dripping by the stove for as long as anyone could remember. I asked her which of these tricks she remembered. She was quiet for a moment, and then she laughed. Not a nostalgic laugh, an incredulous one. She said, "We did all of those." "What do you mean, which ones?" "We did all of them." And then she said something that reframed this whole script for me. She said, nobody in her house ever talked about any of it as making do. Nobody used that phrase. The tricks were just how things were done. There was no sense of hardship attached to them. No self-pity. If a drawer stuck, you got the candle. If the pan had rust, you got the potato. If the shoes were wet, you got the newspaper. It was competence. It was the ordinary competence of people who knew how their household worked and kept it working. That is the part nobody tells you when they talk about post-war working class Britain. Not the poverty, which was real, but the confidence, the absolute, quiet confidence of people who could solve the problems in front of them because they had the knowledge to do it. That knowledge was not written down. It did not need to be. It lived in the hands and the habits of the people who held it. Number 2. Vinegar rinse for hair. Before Pantene and Vidal Sassoon occupied 2 full aisles of every supermarket in Britain. Working class women rinsed their hair with one thing, a tablespoon of white vinegar in a jug of warm water, poured through after washing, then rinsed clean. That was the entire routine. It works because soap and hard water disturb the outer cuticle of each hair shaft, leaving it dull and tangled. An acidic rinse closes the cuticle back down. The hair dries flat and shiny. These women did not know they were adjusting pH balance. They just knew their hair looked better with the vinegar than without it. That was sufficient. A bottle of white vinegar cost 4 pence in 1955 and lasted months. Your conditioner costs £4 and is gone in a fortnight. Same chemistry, different price tag. Your Nan won that one easily. Number 1. Dolly Blue in the washing water. This is the one that tops the list. And honestly, it is the trick I find myself randomly thinking about at 2 in the morning, because the logic of it is just so satisfying. Every Monday in working class Britain, before the white sheets and school blouses went into the final rinse, a small muslin bag of a synthetic blue pigment went into the water with them. Dolly blue. You swirled it until the water turned faintly blue. The whites went in. The whites came out whiter than white. Here is why. Cotton yellows naturally over time. No amount of washing fully removes it. But the human eye perceives whiteness relatively. A trace of blue in the fabric counteracts the yellow cast and tricks the eye into seeing something brighter than the fabric actually is. The same principle sits inside modern LED lighting. Your nan cracked colour theory with a penny bag from the corner shop. Reckitt's was selling Dolly Blue from 1883. Generation after generation used it every Monday without knowing the science. They just knew it worked. The big detergent brands later built the same optical trick into their washing powders. They never mentioned that. They just charge considerably more for the privilege. Here is my challenge to you. Try one of these this week, just one. Put the candle on the stiff drawer, stuff newspaper in your wet shoes tonight. Drop vinegar in a jug for the final hair rinse. See if it does not work exactly as well as everything on this list says it should. Because the argument that runs through every single one of these 15 tricks is not about nostalgia. It is not about wishing we were back in a terraced house with no central heating and a tin bath in the kitchen. Nobody is recommending that. The argument is this: these families were not surviving despite having almost nothing. They were thriving because of what they knew. The knowledge they carried was hard-won, rigorously tested by daily necessity, and quietly extraordinary. It was replaced not because something better came along, but because something more expensive came along. Something that could be sold. Something that created a dependency that the old knowledge never did. Your nan could fix the stiff drawer with a candle stub. She could clean the rust off the pan with a potato. She could make the white white for a penny and keep the shoes dry for nothing and put out a chip pan fire without losing the kitchen. She did not need a product for any of it. She needed knowledge, and she had it. That knowledge is not lost. It has been waiting. Every single entry on this list is as true today as it was in 1953. The chemistry has not changed. The wood still responds to wax. The cast iron still yields to oxalic acid. The hair cuticle still closes under acid rinse. White still looks whiter next to blue. Try one. Come back and tell me if it worked. I already know the answer, but I want to hear you say it.